Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Roll 'em If You Got 'em. I am Dakota, and as always, I am joined with by Carl.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And in today's episode, we are going to be doing our Baratheon faction overview. This is Baratheons for the Song of Ice and Fire, the miniature game.
Let's go.
Uh, so getting right into it for their general gameplay. First point, and you'll notice it's kind of right out the gate. It's really almost like two factions that are like merged into one faction. It works for the most part, kind of, sort of, but then it has like some weird stuff. It's kind of forced, I'll say that. But like what they do share is pretty generalized, which we'll go over. Actual gameplay style wise, they're like a slower army. They got a lot of heavy armor dudes. They have more like reactive type of things. So your opponent puts out like a token, you can reactively like pull that token off. Like they have like an attack back type of deal. More of that type of stuff. Defensive in nature. Then kind of per like faction loyalty that you go with, which I'll dive into here kind of in our next slide, you can either skew to like damage output or a little bit more of like a healing type of thing. So you can kind of go one of two ways.
So would you call them more beginner friendly in the sense that they're forgiving to being able to have some resilience, but not beginner friendly in the fact that like you will get outmaneuvered by someone who knows how to maneuver?
Uh, yeah, I would say they're like relatively beginner friendly. Actually, if you actually, my bottom point here is I would kind of describe them themselves are a little bit of like a noob stomper type of faction. So like if I played, say, I played Baratheons and I was getting you into the game. Generally, I think even two in our first game we played, we just pushed our stuff to the middle and fought each other. You don't want to do that versus Baratheons. You don't really want to just like march straight at them.
Right. If you
You
go
got to,
if you go one
you got
on
to,
one with their
yeah,
units, like they're gonna outlast you.
exactly. So it's really easy, like when new people start to say, "Oh, I'm losing to Baratheons. What am I doing wrong?" It's like, well, you need to use like your speed and like flank and like,
Ganging up on them.
yeah, you got to be able to like figure out how to like gang up on things and like use activations, that type of stuff. So they're a little bit of a noob stomper, I think, in that way, just because like straight on, you'll probably like lose a one-on-one fight unless you have like your own broken OP mechanics usually.
Sure.
Um, I would guess I'd say too they're probably um a pretty good faction for like a new player. I think them, even Starks would be, because Stark's game plan is very much just charge. So as a new player, you're gonna just do that a lot. Like you might not win with Starks because you'll die. Baratheons, you can kind of just figure it out from there. You have to be a little bit more, I think, active in like playing tactics cards and that type of stuff with Baratheons too.
Okay. Makes sense.
Um, Going through, I'd say they have about average melee. They have some units that are on like the upside. I would say maybe more units that are on like the downside, but just very average. They don't do even a whole lot to like swing up in a crazy way. So just overall average. Morale wise, they're definitely average to like high side morale. And defense, excellent defense. A lot of units. So they have probably, I think, the only 2+ save unit in the game. A bunch of 3+ save stuff. Nothing really goes to. I think there's like 1 or 2 units that might be like a 5+ save, but they are like an offensive unit. I would argue this might be the best group of NCUs out of every faction. Some people will say like, "Oh no, you do this," but like if you look at everything, every NCU in Baratheons, they're all pretty good, and you could be like, you could pretty much be justified in using any of them in any way, which is, I think, it's one of their strengths.
Sure. Some
What?
versatility amongst the NCUs.
Yeah, versatility. Because then instead of saying, "Oh, I didn't pick the right one," you could be like, "I picked one. It wasn't right for maybe that situation, but it was good."
Sure.
And then kind of their weaknesses, I would say they're weak versus Cav, also speed, kind of go hand in hand there. Getting flanked, when you have a 3+ save in the front, and then you're flanked and instantly that's a 4+ save, and if they have sundering, that's a 5+ save. Your defensiveness has just gone down. Like
Goes away real fast.
you are now just a unit with average melee and now not really great defense or morale.
Sure.
They're weak to any direct wounds. So if they're just like taking wounds from, you know, like precisions or any type of mechanic that's going to deal a wound. And then even to just straight up, they're weak to sundering and they're weak to vicious. Once you can like move them off of their saves and, just do that damage, they just don't like it. Like their whole thing is like, if you run at me with no sundering and I can save on a 3-up and like roll well and pass my morale, I'm going to do well.
Yep. Okay.
Like I said, kind of already mentioned the noob stompers, and then I will just say this faction probably has like the coolest set of models as well. If you're into that like knightly armor type of stuff, I mean, they're all basically wearing armor, swords, hammers. So best, I think, aesthetic of any faction. You might argue against me on like, well, my favorite is such and such and such. All right, whatever, man. In general, Baratheons I think are the coolest.
All right.
All right. So into kind of the loyalty. So I did mention this. There is the Stannis loyalty, and then there is the Renly loyalty.
Yeah. So they're kind of two armies in one almost, because a lot of people only play like one loyalty. They're like, oh, I'm a Stannis player. And
yeah.
It kind of it narrows you down, but it also probably makes you pretty good at like just the Stannis things.
Yeah. You can like go one or the other or both. I've generally used both. I know in like the tournaments that I've played with them, I'll take like one Stannis because like the Stannis side is very good at like this set of stuff, and then I'll take like one Renly because it's like they can like do some pretty cool counters depending on what you're fighting. But yeah, I mean, some players go one way or the other. It cuts down, I think, essentially a lot of what you're going to be using for the faction, just in general, even like gameplay wise. If you play a bunch of games, just gives you more options. So going into the Stannis side, I would say he's probably got a little bit more offensive output. He works with a lot of like vicious and panic combos. I would say, so I put here his more focused synergies. What I mean by that is more, you're going to look at the commander and then be like, I get it. I get what this commander's just doing by like instantly looking at those cards, looking at the units.
Okay.
And I also think he's got a little bit slightly more interesting style, but he's very that counter Bara style, just because he's going like offensive, and then he has some stuff too where like you trigger panic tests on yourselves or you take wounds off yourself, which can work, but also can like hinder you and like kind of mess you up in some matchups.
Okay.
The Renly side, he's got a little bit more healing. I think about not every commander has healing, but there's a lot more healing involved. I don't know. I say more convoluted synergies. They're not really as straightforward. And like some of the commanders, I think every one of Renly's commanders has like one card you look at and go, man, that card just kind of sucks. And then you're like, okay, I need to like play this card, and then the unit's ability triggers this, and then this happens, and like kind of like running more things together that you got to do. But it's still strong. And then I would also say he's a little bit more bland and just in line with that Bara style of like defensive, stand behind our shields, do our things, and then he can make like you can make plays in your own in other ways with him.
So would you say he gets a little more use out of like the general Bara troops, whereas Stannis kind of just like Stannis guys?
I would say it's probably a mix between both of them right now. I think it depends on like the commander. I'm not gonna say both of them don't use like the general style troops. I think it just depends on more what you're going for.
Okay.
So, all right, into the basic deck. So both sides share the same basic deck. I think this is probably one of the, I don't want to say the best basic deck, but it's very much, you look at this and like you have like a card for every situation. It's solid. There's one dud, and it just, I would say good in general. Like it's just a very good general deck.
Yeah, a lot of crown and tactic zones, which is, if the tactics is there, a lot of times you're getting it, and then the crown is one where a lot of opponents in the game don't care about the crown, so you'll be able to get that crown without going out of your way and reaching for it.
Yep. Some of the like standout cards, I think there's probably five good cards, two that are like meh. Sustained Assault is a meh card. Oath of Duty, which is their once you've died card, it's not that good because really as Baratheons you don't want to die, so like you just don't get use out of that card. And if like a unit does die, your whole game plan could just fall apart if it's too early in the game.
Right. Because a lot of times you're only rocking like 4 combat units with
Yeah,
Baratheons.
yeah. Once you lose one and you don't like be able to like trade one back real quick, it can get real rough.
It's pretty
It's
rare to see a 5 combat drop, with the exception of the what's the solo Stannis rider.
the noble. Even
Yes.
with nobles, I was looking up some lists because I wasn't really too familiar with lists right now. They're running about 4 combat units with a noble as one of them, but the noble is a pretty good support piece now for
Sure.
how it was updated the last one.
Okay.
But really like the best 5 cards are the Baratheon Conviction, which is a heal, Stag's Wit, which is a remove a condition token when you take one, which is just solid in
It
general.
can be enormous depending
Uh-huh.
on the matchup for sure.
Yep. Baratheon Justice is like you dish out more tokens. Final Strike is you, um, whatever wounds you take, you just deal hits back to the attacker, which is, it's kind of counter because you can be like, well, if I'm playing defensively and not taking a bunch of wounds, uh,
You're not going
I'm
to get a
not.
lot of mileage out of that card when the time comes.
But then there's a few units where you're like, yeah, charge that unit.
Right. Yeah.
I'll take 10 wounds and or 11 wounds and like dish them all back to you.
Especially if you have, some heals in your pocket ready to jump back on that unit.
Correct. Yep. And then I'd say like the flashiest card is Ours of the Fury. It's an attack buff, which Crown Envelope you get either like +1 to hit, Sundering, or Vicious. So it's just like a generally good attack buff, depending on what you're using on. So those are the basic decks. Now this is all of the basic units, NCUs, and attachments. There's currently 5 basic units that they both can share. I do believe there's another cav unit coming out that is going to be shareable by both. It's like a light cav. I don't know all the details. I just kind of saw some like weird pictures.
Yeah, I've seen them.
The 3 units are the top 3 units that you're kind of going to most see across any of either loyalty right now. Champs, they're just a solid 2-up save cav. They're kind of slow, kind of weak offense, but they're a 2-up, 6-up, and they just like take buffs well. Stag Knights, 7-point unit, pretty good offensive unit, really good actually defensive order, overall solid unit. And then now Sentinels, they went to 5 points recently. They were always like 6 points, but as a 5-point unit, they're pretty decent offense. They have Sentinel for like a counter charge or counter move, really good. Wardens and Halberds, I haven't seen as many of them lately. Like you still use Wardens, they're 5 points. They're in the mix as just like your baseline. Like I'd like somebody to be defensive, and they're fine at that.
Yeah, the Sentinels are a nice patch for one of their biggest weaknesses, which is movement.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you have a savvy opponent, they can play around that usually pretty well. But if you know what you're doing, you keep your Sentinels back so that you can take advantage, so that they're not the ones getting attacked, essentially. Getting your opponent to attack your other units so that your Sentinels can do Sentinel things.
Yeah, the nice thing is that they made this unit 5 points, I believe. I remember seeing it at 5 points. If I'm wrong on that, I'm just wrong. I'm pretty sure. I'm like 95% sure it's 5 points now, which just makes it be where you can take multiple.
The comments will let you know.
They'll let me know.
How dare you be wrong?
But like them being 5 points, which I'm pretty sure they are, you can now just easily take multiple, where all of a sudden your opponent can't just play around it as easy. Where they're like, shit, I really need to like kill these champions, but I know I'm just going to open myself up to some Sentinels. And then the 2 NCUs, you got Alistair Florent and then Shira Errol. Shira is just like a general, claim a zone, do a thing. And then Alistair, he's got a very unique mechanic, which is once he does a zone, you can swap him onto another zone. So you can take him and basically 3 times a game guarantee that you're either on the letters or the crown or both. So if you go first, you just take crown or letters. If you go, then your opponent goes, say they take the crown to block one of your zones. You can then use Alistair to flip on it and you activate your basically everything. Or if you go second, you can, force put him on like a zone you want. He also works well with Baelish. They're kind of like the dynamic duo of just like, I'm going to control that tactics board. And you can do a lot of defensive stuff with them as well.
Right.
All right, so the basic units. The attachments, they're pretty generic. They're both just 1 point. I know the Master Warren's 1 point. Stag Knight Noble might be 2 points. He's not bad, just kind of general. I think he is 1 point now. I can't remember. But anyways, moving on to the Stannis. We're going to start with Stannis Loyalty. These are his units. He's got 5 of them. kind of a well-rounded mix. He's got the solo noble. So you run this guy, he's like 4 points. He's got a cool, like, you gain a token, you just use the order, remove that token. So you can like keep him in your backline on objective, pop tokens off.
Sure.
He's got the Lore Faithful. They have a cool faith token system mechanic, which is all about like buffing their attacks. They're one of those glass cannon units that I was saying. They got the 5-up defense, 4-up morale. So like if you charge them and deal a bunch of hits, you'll deal a bunch of wounds. They're probably going to pass a panic test, and be able to trigger stuff. And then I'll talk about the Lightbringers next. The long range shooting unit have been very good throughout the game. They shoot, they deal vicious, and then they like pop a panic to another unit, which like I know like free folk, they hate that because they're all like terrible panic.
Right, it can be catastrophic for
even other factions do, because you end up passing that panic on at a -2, so it can just get real weird.
Sure.
And then the last two, they're kind of like the elite units. It's the Kingsmen and the Queensmen. They both have 2 the last, which basically when they die, they take a morale test and they don't die. And then they have kind of different abilities in themselves. The Kingsmen are like offensive focused, and the Queensmen are more of that defensive focused, gonna hang around and just like bully you. So 2 pretty good things. Oh, and both their abilities trigger off of holding the crown. So
okay.
Yeah.
So it works with a lot of the rest of the army.
Yeah, yep. And they've gone through a few iterations. But this one I think has kind of been like the best, because they used to both like tutor cards, and then like the people would be like, well, the cards are too strong for that they're tutoring, and then like they nerfed them and then they both sucked. It's just they've been all over the place.
Yeah, sure.
Onto the NCUs. Like I said, I'm not going to really talk too much about each one of these specifically, because they're all pretty good in their own right for what you want to do. Axel and Mel, they deal with more of like doing panic shenanigans, and like Axel's more tokeny. Mel, she's 5 points and like makes an enemy take a panic test at a big negative and take more wounds. Davos, he basically has like 3 built-in winter is coming orders, so like you can charge and like no orders or tactics cards. Crescent is like you can take the crown, which is kind of one of the weaker zones, and replace it for getting cards. And like Sleece and Shireen, they're 6 points, a little bit weaker. They're like another don't die mechanic.
Okay.
And then Patchface, he's the one, if you know your opponent's deck, he's really good because he can just make him discard a card 3 times a game. But
nice.
he's 5 points. It's kind of tougher to use, I think. And then these are the attachments. A lot of cool different things on the attachments. I'm actually not too sure on everybody's points to be like, oh, he's good, he's bad. But generally you could like find a spot for any one of these. If you are like, I have 1 point, I wouldn't go out of your way to put like 3 of these dudes in. Okay. If you have like 1 or 2 points, maybe you throw one of these in. Multiple of them have the True Conviction ability, which is kind of niche use. You see it and you're like, oh, that's really good, because it's rerolling attack dice. But it's when you have fewer remaining ranks. So
yeah, so Andrew and Justin are the only 2 pointers. Looks like the rest of them are 1s. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine.
No.
Yeah, they're
Nope, not Andrew. Axel.
Yeah, I do know Axel is, and then Justin is as well.
Yep.
Which makes sense. But back to the True Conviction, it's rerolling attack dice when you're fewer remaining ranks, which helps, but like you don't want to, like, you don't really hang out at fewer remaining ranks too often to like get most use out of that. And the most use I've seen out of that is using Davos, putting him in archers, and then using the archers to heal other units. And then when he shoots, you reroll your shooting attack dice, and then you can heal his unit back later. It's kind of a cool combo. And then you have the 2 generics. So the Noble also is a generic attachment, which gives a unit to Cav Sentinel, which is good.
Right,
but
especially in a slow army.
And then the Red Priestess, she gives out more panic. She gives out panic and vulnerable tokens, but at you taking wounds. So,
cool.
Those are the generic those are the attachments. Onto the candidates, the commanders now. We're going to start with Stannis, his 3. So Stannis Rightfellow, he has been like consistently since he released just a very strong commander. He has the most, probably the biggest offensive output card in the game. Somebody's be like, oh, well, this one has a good one. But his tactical approach is you put a token on, and then you expend that token for either D3 wounds or 3 wounds if it's Stannis's unit. He also, like, his abilities go into, like, he gives mark target, so he just activates put a token. Solid. One of his cards is just dump a bunch of tokens. The other one is if a unit has a bunch of tokens, you can turn off like 3 abilities. If they have 3 tokens, you can turn off 3 abilities. If they have 1 token, turn off 1 ability, so on and so forth. Just generally a strong commander throughout because he buffs the offensive output really well, especially of his unit. Wrong way. The next Stannis is Stannis, the One True King. He's more of that R'hllor focused unit, so he kind of buffs like R'hllor units a little bit better. Which I actually didn't mention this when we were talking about the units. Some of them do have that R'hllor keyword. It's like Faithful and the Queensmen for sure. I think the Lightbringers do too. I'm not even sure. Yeah, so he gets a little bit better buffs with them. One's like an attack buff. The
Lightbringers do have it, yes.
Okay, gotcha. So 3 of his 5 units have it. And no, the Noble doesn't. I don't think the Noble does. Not too sure. Doesn't matter. Not a big point. You're not using the cards on him anyways.
Right.
One of his test of faith is you're gonna max take. Oh wait, no, not test of faith. Azor Ahai. You're gonna max take 1 wound from failing a panic test, so you can basically like negate somebody trying to panic bomb you with him. R'hllor's name is just that offensive output, and then the test of faith is you get +1 to defense dice rolls after passing a morale test, and you get to remove all tokens. So a very good defensive card.
Yeah, very.
Just solid in general, and then he himself provides a little morale buff to his unit. And then we got the third Stannis here, so there is 3 of them. This right now, I would say, is the weakest Stannis, because he's a mounted Stannis, and Baratheons only have access to 1 mounted unit of their own. So
yeah, for now.
Yeah, for now. So he isn't too bad. He's got more like tricksiness, like he gives insight to a unit. He has ride them down, which we saw with the Tully Commander, which deals hits on a charge. His coolest card, I think, is on the double. So when you activate your friendly cav, you actually give that unit an extra 3 inches of movement on their maneuver. So you can turn champions free maneuvering from 4 into 7.
Right.
And then
essentially doubling their
movement. Exactly. So like you could go from being like in the flank to maybe in the rear, or in the front to definitely in the flank.
Right.
And then the muster is just like a heal. Like you get to you get to heal his unit, but you get to retreat, and then after your retreat, you get to make a maneuver. Or so when you activate and declare a retreat, after you make your retreat move, you can then make a maneuver. So you can like get some more movement.
Yeah, and then on the double, not just accessing, flanks and rears, but just accessing a unit in general. Your opponent might have been like, oh, at this distance, they have to hit a 12 charge.
Exactly. And now you're like, oh, that's a more realistic charge that you're going to hit there.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Even like late game where you're like, shit, I need to get across the board to like keep myself in it. All right, on to the next commander, Andrew. I've just generally liked him because he kind of plays into that style that I like, which is just like go, 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 hit the offense. But like I said, doesn't always play into Baratheon's strengths.
Sure.
He has assault orders, which we've seen through other commanders, which is a free attack or charge on his unit. Reckless Fury basically gives a vicious and highest attack die, and then Rush of Aggression is an auto 6 charge, which you don't really see actually much in the game anymore, and Critical Blow, but you also become vulnerable. So very much to put the foot on the gas, play some offense. And then his I think he has true conviction on his commander, which is meant, and then he's got First of the Kingsmen, which you always count as controlling crown and letters for tactic zones with him. So you can like, you want to hit your assault orders early in the round, but you don't want to give up like a maneuver. Well, put it on the horse, assault orders from there. You get to charge with him. You get to play Ours of Fury on Andrew's unit and just crank it up to 11 on offense. And do a lot of cool combos. So very, Very offensive-minded commander. Very fun to play. The next one is Axel Florent. He has a couple cool cards. One card where I've always read it and I'm like, why is this a card? Because it's like jumping through 3 hoops. But he gives stalwart, intimidating presence. Firing charge is one of the only other instances I can think of right now that are auto 6 charge. But you also become vulnerable yourself. He has his one card is, I believe it's R'hllor's Wrath, which I'll actually read this because it's the one where you're like, what the fuck is this card? So it's when a friendly combat unit. Oh wait, no, it's actually not that one. It's Fire Resolve. Both of these are kind of mediocre. Fire Resolve. I'll read this one first because you can be like, huh. So it's when a friendly R'hllor unit activates, this unit performs one morale test. On a success, one enemy engaged with this unit suffers one panic test at -1 for each remaining rank in this unit, which is weird because like faithful are very squishy.
Right.
So that's super weird. And then on a failure, they become panicked. So you're basically passing a morale test to like trigger a panic test. And you're like, huh.
Okay.
That's weird. And your enemy has to be engaged. So like going back into that whole thing doesn't happen. And then his other one is, oh, go ahead.
I mean, I see what they're doing with the trying to generate a faith token, you know, and stuff. So you're kind of getting a secondary bonus with this card, being able to do your faith token related bonuses. But yeah, it does seem like you read it and you're like, what else does it do?
It's like literally.
What about second abilities?
Yeah. Literally, if you're reading this card, the main thing is when a R'hllor unit activate, this unit performs a morale test. That's all you almost need to know with this card, and you play it on your faithful to get them an extra token. Maybe you've like token dumped earlier, and it's later in the game, and you want to get more back, or just to like spiral it up at the beginning, so you have like a bunch of tokens. But yeah, and then the other one is when an NCU claims a zone, you replace that zone with that enemy. You target an enemy unit. The enemy suffers a panic test with -1 to their roll for each R'hllor unit within short range. On a failure, so they have to fail the damn thing. In addition to suffering wounds, they also become vulnerable and weakened. So you're like triggering an extra panic test that they may or may not fail off of a tactics cards and replacing a tactic zone. Kind of a little lackluster in my opinion, because you're just jumping through like multiple hoops.
Yeah, I mean, when I read these, the things that come to mind are like spread fear and prey on fear and things that I guess you do have access through neutrals, but
right.
I don't think any of these Baratheon attachments had any of those, right? I guess Axel's attachment has the intimidating presence, which
correct.
So there are some things, but
right, yeah. There is some things, but you're just like, do I want to like play and build around that when the couple commanders you've ever seen, they're just a little bit more straightforward in what they're doing. So Axel's a little bit further out there.
Yeah.
All right, and then the next one, I'd say arguably Davos is like the worst Baratheon commander.
But he's the coolest one, though.
He is pretty cool, and he has a lot of tricks that are not too bad, but like he just doesn't really add much, and he actually takes out Final Strike, which is and can be a pretty good card. So he's got 2 cards that are fealty, which we'll see later. We'll explain it more with Lannisters, but it's a enemy fails a panic test, you get to heal, and everything, which is they named it everything instead of just naming it regroup and reform. It's essentially the exact same as regroup and reform, except you can return a destroyed attachment. Yeah. So it's a heal. And then he's got Parlay, which this is an interesting card, but can sometimes just be weird. Basically, you activate a unit, and then you can point in an enemy unit and go, that unit's also activated. And if it's one of Davos's unit, you both get to heal. You and the enemy get to heal, which is weird.
Yeah.
And then Flea Bottom Tricks is essentially Sentinel, but without being able to charge or attack. So you get to maneuver or march or pivot.
Okay, sure.
So he's got like healing and maneuver and like some weird stuff, and then he himself comes with outflank, which you don't really want to do with Baratheons because you're just too slow to help support outflanked unit anyways. So he's just weird. All right, and then the last one is Justin Massey. He's not too bad. He's kind of more just focused on healing, and a little bit of movement. And he's got himself just like a morale bubble. So he does have regroup and reform, and it's named correctly.
Yeah.
And then he's got sudden retreat, which isn't too bad. And then he's got precious supplies, which basically, after an enemy completes an attack, you get to restore 1 wound. And then if you have if you have 1 destroyed rank, you restore 1 wound. If you have 2 destroyed ranks, you restore 3 wounds. If it's Justin's unit, plus 1 wound. So you can be sent down to your last rank, heal 4 wounds, and get a third of your unit back.
Yeah,
which is pretty good. So that's it for the Stannis side. Like I said, a little bit more offensive focused. Stannis is the best commander on this side, in my opinion, which I think is kind of cool and how it should be, in a way.
Right.
All right. That's the Stannis side. On to the Renly side. So these are the Renly loyalty units. They're a little bit different. A couple units have this same thing of perseverance and valor. Basically, when you attack, before you attack, you restore a wound. Deadly Bloom, which is on the Rose Knights, you'll also see that later. And this is kind of one of those things that make it a little bit more weird. It's not weird to trigger, but like more complex when triggering stuff. Because when you heal a wound, you also deal a wound. You have to think of every time you're healing that you're also dealing it back to them.
Right. Which is nice.
Yeah, it is nice. And then you have a 6-point Lance Cavalry unit, which is pretty good. The Thorn Watcher are an excellent unit now because they're 6 points with 6 movement, and they hit on 3s, and they have a short range bow.
Okay.
So like they're pretty fast, and they can hit pretty hard. And obviously they take like Arches of Fury well with giving them Sundering, that type of stuff. And after they complete a melee attack, they get 2 free retreat, and then whenever they retreat, they heal. So
Good
pretty
stuff.
solid.
Yeah.
Pretty like solid, and I'd say like focus set of units. They just kind of, a few of them there just lack a little bit of the defense, but you kind of get that through like the buffs and the generic units. And then Rainbow Guard, you can see the card here. We'll touch on them more later, but this is Renly 3's specific commander unit, which it's a shame that it's locked to Renly 3 in my opinion, because it's a cool unit. It has access to the Baratheon banners, but Renly 3 is probably the second worst commander in the game. And the Baratheons,
Okay.
if not the worst. Renly's NCUs, so he only has access to 4 NCUs, which is kind of a crime in itself. But like they're all pretty good. I mean, you're going to use Courtney a lot. He basically is, if your opponent takes a tactic zone that you've designated, you get to heal, which is solid. Eldon lets you recycle and not recycle cards, but draw more cards up. Marjorie, she gives us like a little 1 wound heal, and if they're engaged, they can become vulnerable, which that can be really strong when you heal 5 times with her throughout a game.
Sure.
And maybe deal those deadly blooms. And then Olenna, she is in quite a few lists. She is very strong, but when she claims a zone, she can pick an enemy NCU. They either lose all abilities for the round, or if that NCU claims a zone, one of the enemy's units takes D3 hits and becomes weakened. So like round 1, where you're like, none of your NCUs matter. I'll deal the hits. But then if you're playing like I don't know, I can't think of like a super strong NCU off the top of my head right now. You can just be like, you're losing all your rounds or all your abilities this round. So, pretty good. She is 5 points though, so a little bit more expensive. And then you have Renly's attachments. So he's got a shit ton of attachments. So his Rainbow Guard unit basically comes with 7 models, and all those models get their own named character that you may or may not use. Some of these guys are cool. Some of them you're like,
same thing as Joffrey's.
Yep, same thing as Joffrey's. Yep. Some of them are cool. Some of them you're like, I would never use it. Like Loris, he has Deadly Bloom, so you can put Deadly Bloom for 1 point into any unit. Um, uh, which is interesting, but like not useful. You have Brienne. She's got two different versions, both not too bad. She's probably got the most models out of anybody in the game too at this point. Because she just has two Baratheon on her own, plus like a neutral, and then like a special neutral, and
Sure.
um,
One thing we mentioned last episode about Cat having never changed since the inception of the game. Brienne the Blue that's been the same the whole time, right? That's been that ability for as long as I can remember, at least.
yeah. Well, this is her ability that came out in the Baratheon Heroes 2 box.
Yeah.
Her neutral, which we don't talk about neutrals in this, not too much, but her neutral has always been like Nightly Vow,
Yeah.
which is like pick an enemy unit, you get like +1 to hit and like reroll charges or some bullshit like that.
Yeah. Well, Nightly Vow's different now.
Yeah,
Somewhat.
Nightly Vows changed, but yeah.
Yeah. But like Renly's Protector, I think that ability has been the same the whole game.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it has been the same. She did start out at 0 points, so she would just like if you take Renly, you would just take her.
Yes.
She is 1 point now, so like you do have to pay for it, but it is pretty good. There's some like weird shenanigans you can do with that as well. So you can take like a Sentinel unit and her and one of Renly's commanders, and basically if they attack any of your units, the other like 2 units next to them have the options for free charges themselves. And like if like 2 of them are not orders or tactics cards, so you can like double charge a unit. It's some cool shenanigans with it. So it's useful. It is useful, but it is a lot to play around within your head.
Sure.
And not messing up. The other, who else did I want to point out here? Courtney isn't too bad. He's 2 points though, I think. He's got a movement and a free charge himself off the crown. But like I think you always take his NCU instead. So you're not going to take his attachment.
Right.
And then also in the bottom right, Robar Royce, he is 2 points, but he's also very interesting in the fact that whenever you charge, you give a vulnerable, and then you gain critical blow and precision, which is kind of a lot, I think. You throw him in like the crossbow boys, I just forgot their freaking name, and the Thorn Watch.
Yes.
You basically always charge in, hit on 3s, crit blow, precision. Any ones, you take a wound, but like you'll retreat out after the attack, so you'll just heal your own wound, and all of a sudden like he's kind like that's kind of a very good offensive unit that has some speed
And a vulnerable token on that charge.
and yeah, so like vulnerable is almost the equivalent to sundering, so you can still add sundering and get more sundering.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then also too, he has only 2 generic attachment. One is boldness and courage, which is just plus attack dice or plus rank, and then the Thornwatch Sentinel, pass a morale test, heal, and then just ignore terrain. So like I said, not too bad of attachments. You're just never going to use all of them, and some are better than others, and it's just like finding that right spot. Kind of same with the Stannis side, like I said.
Yeah.
All right, into the first commander, we'll start with Renly because this is his loyalty. This is Renly, the charismatic heir. This is the first Renly to release. He'll be referred to as Renly 1. He himself gives boldness and courage, which is awesome on his unit. So every unit that's like 7 attack dice goes up to 8 or +1 rank. So he like helps that offense. And then he's got himself a short range morale bubble. So everything is just getting +1 better. Card wise, he has like a boldness and courage almost type of card. When you pass a morale test, you get +1 attack die and you restore 1 wound every time you activate. Not bad. Wealth and charisma is like a replace effect, heal, or remove tokens. So he's like counterplaying that token game a little bit. Counter Stannis 1, who is like place tokens. So Stannis 1, Renly 1, kind of opposites on this.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then his other one, They Will Make Me King, is like a group heal or a group deal 1 wound. So very situational set of cards here that you're going to use. But I think Renly's pretty good with just how like the units line up and what you're doing. Like he's just generically solid. Like I said, there's nothing that jumps off the page with him. Just kind of good.
Yeah.
Then we got Renly 2 here, another awesome looking model, but um, he's got a cool ability on his commander, which basically means you can't be the target of orders or tactics cards from your enemy or influenced by NCUs, which is great, like kind of defensive mechanic built into him.
Yes,
Um,
wonderful.
then he gives precision and then +2 to morale test rolls. So he just, you put him in stagnites and they're like a 4 up morale or 5 up morale. They're now like a 3 up, 2 up. Like, you know, never going to fail a panic test. He has a free charge card, which is Hidden Affairs here. So when a unit not containing him is attacked, he gets to make an attack or charge, kind of like Eddard does. So you can like push more offense with him. In his brother's shadow is like a counter commander card, so you can turn off enemy commander's abilities, or you can do like a free maneuver. And then inexplicable return lets you move attachments around or basically like resurrect a destroyed attachment, and put it in a unit. So like maybe somebody expert duelists Renly out, you can play this, put him back in it, continue playing.
Which is
So
wonderful.
yeah, so not bad. I
Because
think.
if they have expert duelists, you're gonna have a hard time protecting yourself from them
Mhm.
because they
Well,
very well maybe it outdrop you at deployment,
yeah.
and then you're probably slower than them. So even if you do finagle it somehow, like they'll come try to find you.
Mhm. Yeah, the only bonuses now with expert duelist is that it's on a 5 plus.
True,
Um,
it's not nearly as good as it was
yeah,
for a very long
but
time.
there is also a new, which I saw this the other day and I just like shook my head like, why do we got this in game? Arya Stark has a neutral attachment, which is very weird on just killing attachments.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I know we're gonna talk about her right now. I just saw that and went, son of a bitch.
Right.
Um, really, we can't just get past that mechanic.
Yeah, like just remove the like things that are like really feels bad. Like I understand you think it's like a cool thematic thing, but it sucks.
And like she has it very easy because basically it's like if you have a token and you make an attack, you can kill the attachment. But then she comes with Sandor, who just like when you activate, you give a token, and you're like, fucking what? But anywho's, we're gonna move past that. Not talking about that today.
It's a different episode.
Different episode. And then we finally have Renly King in the South. So he's Renly 3. He's been the newest one to release. He gets the cool Rainbow Guard, but he's got some shit ass cards. Um,
It's kind of weird that they made it only this Renly gets a rainbow guard.
yeah, I was hoping that when the Rainbow Guard released, any Renly could take
Maybe,
them because then I was like, oh, there's like some cool things you could do with like Renly 2 and Renly 1.
and maybe that's the thing. Maybe here just at first glance, I'm not seeing some of the things that it would break.
Yeah, I don't think there is too
Um.
much it would break, and it's just like this version is just the worst version of him, I think.
Okay. Well,
So
tell me why.
okay, so talking about his attachment first. His attachment isn't bad. It's Swift Strike, which is the free retreat after you attack,
Sure.
and then also always count as controlling the crown and letters. Solid card,
Okay.
solid attachment. Into his trash ass commander cards.
Yeah.
Okay, Knights of Summer. Start a friendly turn. Target one friendly combat unit. That unit performs one morale test. For each zone you control between the crown and the letters, they get +1 to their roll. On a success, each enemy they are engaged with performs one panic test. That's what you get. If this targets Renly's unit, on a success, each enemy in short range suffers one panic test.
It's
So you're just playing a freaking card to trigger panic test, which on Renly's side, you don't do anything with panic. We've already looked through the cards. You just don't do anything with your enemy taking panic test. You don't.
yeah.
Just,
I mean, if you were playing against someone whose list didn't have good panic and
yeah.
maybe you could shove this unit in short range of like 3 units. I think that's going to be difficult most of the time.
Yeah.
Um,
Like you're looking at using this versus like free folk specifically or like
and they have to
Greyjoys.
pass their own morale test. So like
Yeah.
if they shit the bed, you get nothing.
Like you're getting a buff to it, and obviously you want to play this on Rainbow Guard
Yeah.
because you automatically are on a 2 up, so you auto pass.
Yeah.
But it's like you're using a tactics card to make your opponent take a panic test, which they could just pass. You could put them at whatever negative you want. You're not even putting them on a negative. They
Yeah.
could just freaking
Not
pass.
unless
So
you have some other way to put them on a negative.
Because basically, which you don't, you're playing Baratheons. That's not like your shtick.
I mean,
I don't know neutral wise.
corpse
There might be
pile, a couple of neutral things, but
sure, but I would even argue as a Baratheon player, you're not putting corpse piles down on the Renly side. You're putting weirwood trees down if you can.
sure.
Because yeah. So that's a weird card.
Unless you build your list around Knights of Summer. Bet you
Okay.
didn't think about that, did you?
Next card here, overconfidence. When an enemy, we were gonna read these cards. Normally we don't read all these cards. But we're gonna read all of his because they're that bad. So when an enemy
Dakota
ends
really
in,
wants to go in on these cards
I do.
if you guys can't tell.
And if somebody is like, well, he's not bad because of XYZ, whatever, man. It's just like not straightforward. Like, why would I want to put myself through this hell?
Please let us know why Renly 3 is not only not bad, but he's the best of the Renlys.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so overconfidence. When an enemy ends a maneuver, march, or retreat, target one friendly infantry unit in long range, that unit can charge that enemy. It becomes vulnerable and performs one charge action. So you're becoming yourself vulnerable and you perform a charge. If you successfully charge that enemy instead of performing a melee attack, that enemy suffers 2 hits for each remaining rank in this unit. If this targets Renly Baratheon's unit, you may reroll the charge distance dice. This one isn't actually too bad, other than you make yourself vulnerable, which is like, why do I need to make myself vulnerable for playing a card? Like, Stannis 1 has this card or actually it's Ride Them Down, which is the Cav card, which just lets you do it and you don't become vulnerable. And it's like, okay. And even too, like, this could be good on like Wardens, where you're 6 attack dice on 4 anyways. If you free charge them in, you're just 6 hits. So like, it has its niche uses, but it's like, why?
Yeah.
And then finally, Lavish Encampment. When an enemy NCU claims a zone, after resolving that zone's effect, move that NCU to an empty zone. So you don't even cancel the effect, you just get to move them. If you remove them from the crown or letter, target one enemy combat unit, that unit suffers a panic test. So yet again, you're just playing into like making them take a panic test off a kicker. Like, you don't cancel the zone. You don't whatever. You just get to move them to open it up for yourself.
Right.
And then you trigger a panic test, which it's like, I don't know. I just look at these cards and I'm like, they're not good. Like, overconfidence isn't bad. The other two, not what I need. Because I already have Alistair to switch NCs around.
Mm-hmm.
And I have Penrose where I can say, if you take that zone, I'm going to heal.
Right.
Which is a better defense than like saying, I'm going to move you off that zone.
The commander automatically has whatever spots you want to go take. I mean, I'm sure there are situations out there where like you're like, oh, I want to take away the combat and the maneuver from, you know, my Stark opponent, blah blah blah, whatever. But
yeah, it keeps them from like utilizing the holding the zone.
Sure.
But it doesn't
It
keep
like
them from reusing
like
it.
really like, oh, make sure you get these zones. You're like, well, my commander already has those zones. Like, I don't care.
Yeah, and like, you'll generally get one of those zones anyways for all the rest of your units.
Right.
So,
yeah.
like,
So okay.
Yeah. So I know I'm going hard in on his cards here. I just don't think he's great when he gets like maybe one of the best units Baratheons have, because like the Rainbow Guard is a sweet unit, but like it only goes with him. So you're like, fuck. Which we didn't talk about the Rainbow Guard earlier. We'll talk about them now. They have resilience, so every 2 unblocked hits are only 1 wound. So they essentially have 16 wounds. And then they have Rally Cry, so whenever they perform a melee attack, they heal somebody else around them. And then they get access to the Baratheon banners, which is you can pull a flag off. You get either like Crit Blow or Sundering, Vicious, and +1 wound, Panicked, Weakened, or you yourself heal too. So like the banners are like very good in their own right.
Yeah.
These are the same banners that Joffrey has as well. They're not different.
I'll say, is it verbatim?
It is verbatim. The card is just got the stag shield versus the Lannister lions.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, so that's the last Renly. Done talking about him. Cool unit, mediocre commander cards. We're moving on. Next is Courtney Penrose. He's an interesting commander himself. He though competes with his NCU. So he's got Counterplot. basic Lannister card, just a very good counterplay card. You got issue commands, which is like a free attack. When your commander activates, you can pick a different unit to either attack or charge.
Yes.
So you can have him sitting on an objective in like wardens, and then being like, "Hey, you Lance Cav that charged and killed a thing, like, go charge and kill another thing." And then he's got surprise strategy, which lets you discard 2 cards and return 1 from your discard pile to your hand. So you can, or if you're on the letters, you only have to discard surprise strategy. So you can use issue commands multiple times, which is pretty good.
Yeah, very.
And then his commander in general just lets you start with 4 cards, and he keeps the Might of the Throne, which gives him a free charge off the crown. So like you have like some access to like free attacks with him and his units. So he's pretty cool because you can like attack off the crown with his unit and then activate him your next time around and issue commands to another unit. So you can like still almost always attack. And the crown is, like I said, one of the weaker zones. You don't mind attacking off of it. So pretty cool commander. Just competes with his NCU at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
Next we're on to old Eldon Estermont. He is like the pinnacle of like Baratheon, just like step into the danger zone and find out. He has taken a hit because the champs aren't as good, but he is still just a generally good Baratheon commander. His cool card is Battle Endurance. So basically, as the game progresses, you get those said buffs per round, and they stack, which is great on any of these Baratheon units as long as they're not dying. He also has Martial Superiority, which used to have a couple more hoops to jump through. They simplified it. But basically, each miss, the attacker suffers a hit. And this is before rolling attack dice. So you can also like kind of stack this with like Counter-Strike, where you're like, oh, you're going to be rolling a bunch of dice. If I get you to miss, you'll do this. And then if like you don't miss, you can be like, or I can take Final Strike and like deal those hits as well. It also plays off the Counter-Strike 2 from the Wardens. That's where I was going with it. And then if Eldon's in the unit, it's -1 to hit. So pretty good defensive card there. And then he's got like a weird kind of hefty ransom, which involves attachments again, where you can either gain an extra victory point if you have a friendly die, or if you kill an enemy, you get extra attack dice and morale. So it's kind of like a win more card almost. And a little bit of a combat card. Kind of cool. And then his abilities are mark target, so you just pass out vulnerables to help the offense a little bit. And then he has hardened. So after rolling defense dice, you block 1 hit for each of this unit's destroyed ranks. So once you start getting lower in ranks, you can use this, block a couple extra hits. So not too bad. Was a very good commander for a long time for Baratheons.
Yep.
And then the final commander here is Loras Tyrell, another interesting commander. Has one really great card, a couple of cards that are like, okay, not too bad. I don't hate them. Start on his attachment this time. He has Expert Duelist, so you either deal a wound, or you can like take the chance and on a 5-up destroy an enemy attachment. And then each time you pass a morale test, you restore 1 wound. Goes great with like Rose Knights, where pass your morale, restore a wound, deal a wound. His best card is Overgrowth. Start him an enemy turn, target 1 friendly unit. It performs a morale test, so it plays into him healing. If it's engaged with a unit, you automatically pass a test. But on a success, so you have to pass a morale test, attach this card to the friendly unit to the end of the game. While attached, each time that unit is attacked before resolving attack dice, the attacker suffers 1 hit plus 1 hit for each of its remaining ranks. So you get this card on like a full unit with 3 ranks. You auto deal 4 hits before the attacker attacks, which is solid. So something with low armor comes in, deal 4 hits, you could clear a rank before they even fight.
Yep.
Very strong card. His other cards just kind of mediocre. Pass morale, when an enemy attacks, they perform a morale. On a failure, they become vulnerable weakened. and then short range it's -2. So you can like it's kind of defensive, but it's about your opponent passing a morale test. Yet again, if they have high morale, it's up in the air.
Yeah.
And then when friendly unit activates is the last one, which is growing strong. And everybody they're engaged with becomes vulnerable, and then you restore 1 wound +1 for each of its destroyed ranks. So just like activate heal. Good card, solid card. Could be 1 wound, could be 3 wounds.
Okay. Yeah.
So pretty good commander. Swingy overgrowth card, but it's also very good. But that is the last commander. So final thoughts, just to wrap up everything we talked about here. Baratheons, as we've seen, they're slow, very reactive, defensive style. You're either going basically healing or damage. Like you've seen, pretty average melee that you're giving buffs to. Average to that higher side morale, which you're buffing up that high morale.
And by higher morale, we actually mean lower morale.
Yeah, like better.
Gooder. It's gooder morale, guys.
Yeah, gooder morale. Good defense, awesome NCUs, and then you've kind of seen how like the weaknesses go, where like, yep, it's slow, infantry based. If you get to the flanks and you just affect them in that way, they're gonna die.
Right, gang up, those kinds of things.
So yeah,
how you beat them.
So that is it. Carl, do you have any final thoughts regarding the Baratheons?
There's too many of them. That's my final thoughts.
Right.
I feel like they have so many.
Dude, they have
because you're like, they have like a middle army and then individual armies.
Yeah.
And it's like, why can't we be friends? Okay.
Yeah. This is the one too. I almost wish, like, have you seen, they could have just made it like 2 factions, or like give them each their own basic deck that can be more tailored to them, or just straight up make them 2 factions. I wouldn't care. Like, still let them share units. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever. Sometimes it just gets weird. They're not doing too bad, like statistically right now in games. They're about a 50% win rate. Army, they did, I think, get a lot of buffs the past couple patches, which have gotten to this point. So they're not too bad. They're fun to play. If you play them against a new person and they run straight at you, don't hit them too hard.
They won't play anymore.
Yeah, they won't play anymore. But thank you for joining us. Not too sure which army we're going to do next. So keep an eye out for that. We still have Greyjoys, Lannisters, Night's Watch, Martells, Neutrals, and Boltons. On the list yet. So we have about 6 factions left, I think.
More to come. We did have a request for Greyjoys next.
We did have a request for Greyjoys. We had this one being made at the time, so we just kept with this one. We might get to Greyjoys next. We'll see. Just depends on where we can get at with time wise, because I do know Greyjoys, I don't think they're actually too deep of a faction. They're more of they're one of the newer ones. So
sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, and like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye.
Bye.